Imagine you're the most feared warrior in a galaxy spanning thousands of worlds. Your species has conquered star systems, enslaved entire civilizations, and never once retreated from battle. You've faced acid-spitting monsters from the void, mechanical armies that never tire, and psychic beings that can crush minds with a thought. But then you encounter humans. At first, they seem laughable, soft pink skin that tears easily. No natural weapons like claws or fangs. They can't even see properly in the dark or breathe underwater without machines. They live for barely a century while your kind exists for millennia. Yet somehow, these fragile creatures have turned warfare into an art form so terrifying that even the galaxy's apex predators now whisper their name in fear. They don't just fight to win, they fight like the universe itself depends on their victory, even when it doesn't. What makes a species that should be prey into the most dangerous predators the cosmos has ever known? What transforms ordinary humans into legends that make alien soldiers wake up screaming in the middle of their sleep cycles? The answer lies not in their weapons or technology, but in something far more frightening: their absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter the cost. This is the story of how humanity became the galaxy's most lethal force, told through the eyes of those who learned to fear them. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Bone Crusher, his forearms crossed as he studied the small blue planet rotating slowly on the main display. His scarred hide, earned through countless battles across the galaxy, reflected the harsh lighting of the command center. As the supreme military leader of the Vorthak Empire, he had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. This would be number 48. Initial scans complete, Commander, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Grexam. The younger Vorthak's mandibles clicked nervously as he read the data. The planet shows primitive technology levels. Energy signatures indicate they've barely achieved nuclear capability. No evidence of faster-than-light travel or energy weapons. Zethkar's three eyes narrowed with disappointment. Another easy conquest. The Vorthak thrived on worthy opponents, enemies that could provide a decent fight before inevitable defeat. These creatures, these humans, as their intercepted transmissions called them, seemed to offer nothing but a brief target practice session for his fleet. Population, he growled, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded legions across the void. Approximately 7 billion distributed across multiple continents. They appeared to be divided into numerous competing factions. Grexam paused, studying his readings more carefully. Curious, sir. Despite their primitive technology, we're detecting evidence of extensive military infrastructure. They seem to spend considerable resources on weapons designed to kill their own kind. This caught Zethkar's attention. In his experience, species that fought among themselves often produced surprisingly capable warriors when faced with external threats. Still, how dangerous could creatures be when they hadn't even left their own star system? Crude kinetic projectiles primarily, sir. Some basic chemical explosives. They do possess nuclear weapons, but the yields are laughably small compared to our plasma cannons. The tactical officer's report carried the confident tone of someone who had seen true galactic warfare. Our shields could absorb everything they have and barely register the impact. Zethkar nodded slowly. Standard procedure for primitive worlds was simple. Demonstrate overwhelming superiority, demand surrender, then incorporate the population as laborers in the Empire's expanding war machine. Those who refused were eliminated as examples to others. The process typically took less than a planetary rotation. Deploy the Fear Protocol, he ordered. I want their largest population centers to witness our arrival. Send a single destroyer to their primary communication satellites. Disable them without destruction. We want them to see our capabilities but maintain some ability to coordinate their surrender. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within moments, the destroyer Fleshrender separated from the main fleet and began its approach to Earth. Captain Morgath commanded the vessel with typical Vorthak confidence, his crew eager for what they expected to be a brief and decisive demonstration. As the Fleshrender entered Earth's atmosphere, panic erupted across the planet below. Radio frequencies exploded with frantic communications in dozens of different languages. Military installations worldwide activated their defense systems, launching primitive interceptor aircraft that were swatted aside like insects by the destroyer's point defense systems. Sir, reported the communications officer aboard the Bone Crusher, we're receiving thousands of transmissions from the planet's surface. They seem to be attempting to establish contact through every frequency they possess. Zethkar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Fear was a powerful motivator, and these humans were displaying it in abundance. Select their most powerful nation and establish communication. We'll give them the standard ultimatum. The main screen flickered as the translation systems worked to decode the human languages. Finally, a connection was established with what appeared to be the humans' most militarily advanced nation. The face that appeared on screen showed a middle-aged human male with graying hair, wearing what was obviously their version of formal military dress. "This is General Harrison, speaking for the United Nations of Earth," the human said, his voice steady despite the obvious stress of the situation. "We're willing to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." Zethkar stepped forward, allowing the human to see the full intimidating presence of a Vorthak battle commander. His species stood nearly 3 meters tall, with armored hide, 4 powerful arms, and facial features that had evolved from apex predators. The psychological effect on primitive species was usually immediate and devastating. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire," he announced, his voice modulated to emphasize the clicking consonants that most species found terrifying. "Your world now belongs to us. You have one of your planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally. Those who comply will become laborers in our empire. Those who resist will be eliminated." The human's expression didn't change. No immediate collapse into terror, no desperate pleading that Zethkar had come to expect. Instead, General Harrison nodded slowly, as if considering a business proposal. "I see," the human said calmly. "And if we refuse? Then your cities burn and your population is reduced to a manageable size through demonstration of our superior firepower." Zethkar replied, confused by the human's apparent composure. "I have conquered 47 worlds, human. I have seen species far more advanced than yours attempt resistance. All have fallen." What happened next would later be analyzed by Vorthak military scholars as the first sign that humanity was unlike any species they had previously encountered. Instead of fear or desperation, the human general actually smiled. "Commander," Harrison said, his tone becoming almost conversational, "I appreciate your directness. Before we give you our answer, would you mind if I shared something with you? A bit of our history that might interest you as a military professional." Zethkar's mandibles twitched with irritation. The human was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Speak quickly." "We've been fighting wars on this planet for our entire recorded history," Harrison began. "Not just conflicts over resources or territory, but wars where entire civilizations chose death before surrender. We've had battles where humans fought to the last person rather than submit. We've had defenders hold positions against impossible odds not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to let their enemies pass." The human paused, and when he continued, there was something in his voice that made Zethkar pay closer attention despite himself. 600 years ago, 300 men held a narrow pass against an army of thousands. They knew they would die. They chose to die. 200 years ago, an entire city's population fought street by street against invaders, turning every building into a fortress, every room into a killing ground. The attackers won eventually, but they lost so many soldiers that their empire never recovered. Harrison leaned forward slightly, and his next words carried a weight that Zethkar felt in his bones. "We don't surrender, Commander. It's not that we won't. We literally don't know how. For thousands of years, the humans who survived were the ones who kept fighting when rational beings would have quit. You're not facing a civilization that might resist. You're facing one that was forged in the fires of perpetual warfare and has never learned the meaning of the word defeat." The communication ended abruptly, leaving the bridge of the bone crusher in stunned silence. Zethkar stood motionless, processing what he had heard. In 4 decades of conquest, no primitive species had ever spoken to him with such casual confidence. "Sir?" Lieutenant Gregson spoke hesitantly. "Should we proceed with the demonstration?" Before Zethkar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical display showed dozens of new contacts rising from the planet's surface. Not the lumbering missiles they had expected, but something faster, more maneuverable. "Report," Zethkar barked. "Multiple launch detections from across the planet," the tactical officer responded, his voice tight with confusion. "They appear to be, sir. They're targeting the flesh render specifically." On the main screen, they watched as the destroyer began evasive maneuvers, its captain clearly not expecting any significant threat from such primitive weapons. The first wave of human missiles struck the ship's shields, which held easily just as predicted. The second wave followed, then a third. "Their weapons are completely ineffective," reported the tactical station. "The destroyer's shields are absorbing the impacts with no damage." But Zethkar was studying the attack patterns with growing unease. The humans weren't just throwing weapons randomly at his ship, they were learning. Each wave of missiles approached from different vectors, testing the shield configuration. The timing was becoming more sophisticated, the targeting more precise. How many missiles have they fired? He asked.
Current count is over 400, sir, with more launching every few seconds. They're coming from launch sites across multiple continents.
400 missiles against a single ship that could obliterate their entire planet. It was either desperate stupidity or calculated testing. Zethkar was beginning to suspect the latter. The Flesh Render's captain, clearly growing impatient with what he saw as a pointless display, began targeting the human launch sites with precision plasma strikes. Military installations across Earth erupted in brilliant explosions as the superior alien technology demonstrated its power. But the missile launches didn't stop. If anything, they intensified.
Sir, the communications officer reported, we're intercepting human military transmissions. They're treating this as a data collection exercise.
They're studying our weapons, our ship movements, our defensive patterns. Zethkar felt the first stirring of something he hadn't experienced in years. Uncertainty. No primitive species had ever used an initial attack as reconnaissance. They fought to win or fled in terror. They didn't coolly analyze superior enemies while absorbing massive casualties.
Commander, Captain Morgath's voice crackled through the communication system from the Flesh Render. I'm reading multiple underground launches now.
These humans have weapons systems we didn't detect in the initial scans. The tactical display updated to show new missile signatures emerging from hardened silos that had been hidden beneath the planet's surface.
These weapons were larger, faster, and approaching with coordination that spoke of central command and control. Nuclear warheads detected, the tactical officer reported, his voice betraying the first hint of concern. Multiple large-yield devices incoming. Zethkar watched the screen with growing fascination and alarm. The humans were throwing their most powerful weapons at a single destroyer, knowing full well it represented only a fraction of the fleet's total firepower. They were either suicidal or planning something he hadn't anticipated. The nuclear missiles struck the Flesh Render's shields in carefully timed sequence.
The ship's defenses held, but the energy readings showed significant drain on the power systems. More concerning was the pattern of the attacks. The humans were concentrating their fire on specific shield sectors, trying to create localized overloads.
Captain Morgoth, Zethkar opened communication with the destroyer. Withdraw to safe distance and prepare for orbital bombardment. These humans require a more direct lesson.
Understood, Commander.
Beginning withdrawal now. But as the Flesh Render began climbing back toward space, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. Aircraft were rising from hidden bases around the globe. Not the primitive interceptors they had easily destroyed, but something different. Analysis of new contacts, Zethkar ordered. Difficult to classify, sir. They appear to be modified atmospheric craft, but they're showing energy signatures that suggest, sir, that's impossible. What is impossible? The lead aircraft appears to have an improvised fusion reactor strapped to its hull. The others are showing similar modifications. They're flying what amount to crude but functional suicide bombers. Zethkar stared at the display in amazement. In the span of a few hours, these humans had somehow modified their atmospheric aircraft to carry improvised nuclear devices. They were turning their own pilots into guided missiles. The modified aircraft reached the Flesh Render just as it cleared the atmosphere. Captain Morgoth's contemptuous laughter echoed through the communication system as his point defense systems began targeting the approaching craft. Primitive savages, the captain's voice carried across the bridge. They're sending their own people to die for nothing. Our shields will absorb these pathetic attacks just like all the others. But as the first human pilot's craft was destroyed by defensive fire, something unexpected happened. The ship didn't just explode, it detonated in a carefully calculated pattern that sent debris and radiation directly into the path of the following aircraft. The second pilot used the interference to slip past the point defenses and detonate his improvised nuclear weapon directly against the destroyer's hull. The ship's shields held, but barely. More critically, the explosion had been positioned precisely at the point where the previous missile barrage had weakened the defensive field.
Alarms began sounding aboard the Flesh Render as shield integrity dropped below safe parameters. Impossible! Captain Morgoth's voice had lost its confidence. How could they know our shield configuration well enough to target weak points? The answer came in the form of 6 more human pilots who had followed the first 2. Each one approached from a different angle, each one targeting a specific section of the ship's defenses that had been mapped during the earlier missile attacks. They weren't just throwing their lives away, they were executing a coordinated plan based on intelligence gathered during what Zethkar had thought was a futile display of primitive defiance. When the last suicide bomber detonated against the destroyer's hull, the Flesh Render's shields finally collapsed. The ship itself remained intact, but it was now vulnerable for the first time since entering the system. That was when the humans revealed their final surprise. From orbit around Earth's moon, where no life should have been possible, came a transmission in perfect fourth-act battle language. Unknown vessel, this is Lunar Defense Station Alpha. You are ordered to surrender immediately.
The main screen shifted to show a sight that made the bridge crew gasp in collective shock. On the moon's surface, previously hidden beneath camouflaged coverings, massive railgun installations were emerging.
The weapons were crude by Vorthak standards, but they were undeniably functional and pointed directly at the disabled destroyer. Impossible, breathed Lieutenant Grexam.
They don't have the technology for permanent lunar installations. They've barely achieved orbital flight. Commander Zethkar stood in stunned silence, processing what he was witnessing.
In a few hours, these supposedly primitive humans had demonstrated tactical intelligence, strategic planning, technological adaptability, and most disturbing of all, a willingness to sacrifice their own people in precisely calculated ways to achieve military objectives. The flesh render hung in space defenseless, while human weapons tracked its every movement.
But this wasn't what truly disturbed the Vorthak commander. What kept him staring at the display was a growing realization that everything they thought they knew about these creatures was wrong.
General Harrison's face reappeared on the communication screen, his expression still calm, still professional. "Commander Zethkar," the human said quietly, "I believe you wanted our answer to your surrender demand."
Our response is simple: we choose to fight. Not because we think we can defeat your entire fleet, but because that's who we are.
We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of making victory so costly that even the winners lose. The human paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a promise that made seasoned warriors shiver. "You can destroy our cities, Commander. You can kill billions of us.
Oh, but you can't make us surrender, and you can't make us stop fighting. Every world you conquer will cost you ships. Every city you take will cost you soldiers. Every human you kill will have made sure to take as many of your people with them as possible." General Harrison leaned forward, and his final words would haunt Zethkar's dreams for years to come.
"The question isn't whether you can defeat us, Commander. The question is whether your empire will survive the victory." The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Bone Crusher in absolute silence as the crew contemplated the implications of what they had just witnessed.
For the first time in his long career, Commander Zethkar was beginning to understand that he might have found an enemy that even the mighty Vorthak Empire wasn't prepared to face. 3 standard galactic days had passed since the humans had delivered their defiant response, and Commander Zethkar found himself facing a situation unlike any in his 4 decades of military service. The flesh render remained disabled in Earth's orbital space, its crew trapped aboard a vessel that had become more liability than asset. Every attempt to retrieve the destroyer had been met with precise fire from the lunar installations, weapons that showed impossible accuracy for such a primitive civilization.
"Status report," Zethkar commanded as he entered the tactical briefing room aboard the Bone Crusher. His senior officers stood around the holographic display showing Earth and its immediate space, their expressions reflecting the frustration that had been building since the initial encounter. Captain Vexona, his chief tactical officer, gestured toward the display with barely concealed irritation. "The humans have established a defensive perimeter around their planet using a combination of orbital debris, automated weapons platforms, and what appear to be modified mining equipment repurposed as mass drivers."
Mining equipment? Zethkar's mandibles clicked in disbelief.
"Yes, sir. They've somehow converted industrial asteroid processing facilities into kinetic weapons platforms. Our intelligence suggests they accomplished this conversion in less than 48 hours.
Lieutenant Colonel Drakmore, the fleet's intelligence specialist, stepped forward with additional data. "Sir, our deep scans of the planet are revealing defensive preparations that were clearly planned well before our arrival.
Underground bunker networks, hidden weapons caches, and what appears to be a distributed command structure designed to function even after major population centers are destroyed. This information struck Zethkar as particularly ominous.
Most primitive species panicked when faced with superior technology, throwing together desperate defenses in the hope of buying time for escape or surrender. The humans seemed to have anticipated the possibility of invasion and prepared accordingly.
"What about their military capabilities?" he asked. "Surely they can't maintain this level of resistance indefinitely." Captain Vexona manipulated the holographic display to show real-time intelligence feeds from Earth's surface. "This is where the situation becomes problematic, sir. Our monitoring shows that instead of depleting their resources, human military activity is actually increasing. They've implemented what they call total war mobilization." The display shifted to show images captured by surveillance drones. Massive factories that had been producing civilian goods were now churning out weapons and military equipment. Cities were being systematically converted into fortress complexes, with every building modified to serve defensive purposes. "They're turning their entire civilization into a military machine," Drakmore reported.
What's more concerning is the speed at which they're accomplishing this transformation. Their industrial capacity appears far greater than our initial estimates suggested. Zethkar studied the images with growing unease. The Vorthak Empire had conquered many worlds, but they had never faced an enemy that seemed to grow stronger under pressure. Most species crumbled when their normal way of life was threatened. The humans appeared to thrive on it. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Hextall, "we're receiving another transmission from the human leadership." On screen, General Harrison appeared again, but this time he wasn't alone. Flanking him were military commanders from various human nations, their faces showing the same disturbing calm that had characterized the initial contact.
Commander Zethkar, Harrison began without preamble. We've been monitoring your fleet's activities. We notice you haven't yet begun the orbital bombardment you threatened.
We thought you might be interested in understanding why. Before Zethkar could respond, the display shifted to show tactical information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain.
Detailed schematics of Vorthak ship configurations, energy consumption patterns, and what appeared to be accurate assessments of fleet capabilities. How did you acquire this information? Zethkar demanded.
Another human stepped forward, a woman wearing the insignia of what appeared to be their intelligence services.
Commander, meet Dr. Savra. Sarah Chen, our xenotechnology specialist. While your destroyer was testing our defenses, Dr. Chen was testing yours. Every energy discharge from your weapons, every maneuver of your ships, every communication between your vessels has provided us with data. Dr. Chen explained with scientific precision. We now understand your fusion reactor configurations, your shield harmonics, and your weapon cycling rates.
More importantly, we've identified several critical vulnerabilities in your design philosophy. The woman gestured, and the display showed a detailed analysis of Vorthak military technology that was disturbingly accurate. Your ships are built for overwhelming firepower against enemies who fight conventionally. Your shields are designed to absorb massive frontal assaults. Your weapon systems are optimized for destroying large targets in direct combat. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. But you're not prepared for an enemy that doesn't fight conventionally. Your point defense systems can't track thousands of small, independently maneuvering targets simultaneously. Your shields can be disrupted by precisely timed impacts at specific frequency intervals. Your massive energy weapons become liabilities when forced to engage numerous agile opponents. Zethkar felt his confidence beginning to erode as the human scientist continued her analysis with the detached precision of someone discussing technical specifications, rather than warfare that would cost millions of lives. We've run computer simulations based on the data we've gathered, Dr. Chen concluded. If you begin orbital bombardment as threatened, you will achieve your objective of destroying our major population centers. But the energy expenditure required will leave your fleet vulnerable to the secondary attack wave we've prepared. Our models suggest you'll lose between 30 and 40% of your ships in the initial engagement. General Harrison stepped forward again. That's just the opening phase, Commander. We've been studying your Empire's expansion patterns. You maintain control through fear and overwhelming displays of force. But what happens when word spreads that a primitive world cost you nearly half your fleet? How many of your subject worlds might suddenly find the courage to rebel? The psychological warfare aspect of this statement wasn't lost on Zethkar. The Vorthak Empire's power rested largely on reputation. A single costly victory could indeed trigger widespread rebellion among conquered populations who had previously seemed pacified. Furthermore, Harrison continued, our analysis of your logistical systems suggests that replacing those ships will require resources from multiple worlds in your empire. Resources that will need to be diverted from other military operations. We estimate it would take approximately 50 Earth years for your empire to fully recover from the losses you sustained conquering our world. The human general smiled that same disturbing smile that had haunted Zethkar since their first encounter. So the question becomes, is conquering one primitive world worth potentially destabilizing your entire empire? The transmission ended, leaving the Vorthak command staff to contemplate strategic implications that none of them had anticipated. In 4 decades of conquest, Zethkar had never encountered an enemy that understood the broader political ramifications of military action so clearly. Sir, Captain Vexona spoke carefully. Their analysis of our tactical vulnerabilities is uncomfortably accurate. If they've truly prepared coordinated attacks based on this information, show me their defensive preparations, Zethkar ordered. The holographic display updated to reveal intelligence gathered over the past 3 days. What it showed defied belief. The humans had constructed thousands of small, fast-moving spacecraft using technology that shouldn't have existed. Fighter craft equipped with suicide warheads, mining ships converted into ramming vessels, and most disturbing of all, what appeared to be civilian transportation vehicles modified to carry devastating payloads.
They're not building a conventional defense fleet, Drakmore observed with professional admiration despite himself. They're creating a swarm attack force designed specifically to exploit the vulnerabilities in our ship design. How many vessels? Zethkar asked.
Current estimates suggest over 10,000 individual craft, with more being constructed hourly. Sir, they've essentially converted their entire transportation infrastructure into a military asset.
The implications were staggering. The Vorthak fleet consisted of 47 ships, each one a masterpiece of military engineering capable of devastating entire continents. But they were designed to fight other conventional fleets, not thousands of small expendable craft operated by pilots who seemed genuinely eager to die if it meant taking an enemy ship with them. Energy weapons effectiveness against such a swarm? Zethkar inquired.
Limited, sir. Our main cannons are designed for large targets.
Point defense systems can handle dozens of incoming missiles, but thousands of maneuvering craft would overwhelm our targeting computers. We'd need to rely primarily on area effect weapons, which would limit our tactical options.
Captain Vexona pulled up additional data showing human industrial activity. Sir, there's something else. The humans aren't just building defensive forces, they're simultaneously constructing what appear to be offensive capabilities. The display showed massive construction projects on the planet's surface, launch platforms, accelerator cannons, and most concerning of all, what looked like crude but functional spacecraft designed for interplanetary travel. They're building a fleet, Zethkar realized.
Not just defending their world, but preparing for interstellar warfare. Our projections suggest that within one Earth year, they'll have the capability to launch attacks against Vorthak installations and neighboring systems, Drakmore confirmed. They're treating this conflict not as a defense of their home world, but as the opening engagement of a larger campaign. For the first time in his military career, Zethkar found himself contemplating the possibility of withdrawal.
Not because the enemy was militarily superior. The Vorthak fleet could still blast the entire planet if necessary. But because victory might cost more than the Empire could afford. His contemplation was interrupted by another alert from the communication station. Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from across the human planet. Not from their military, but from what appear to be civilian populations.
Civilian populations?
Yes, sir. They appear to be volunteers. The main screen filled with dozens of human faces, men and women of various ages, each speaking directly to camera systems that were somehow transmitting to the Vorthak fleet. Zethkar listened as the translation systems converted their words into Vorthak battle language. My name is Dr. Jennifer Walsh, and I'm a pediatric surgeon from the city they call New York. I want you alien bastards to know that I've spent my life saving children, but I volunteered to pilot one of our defense fighters, not because I want to kill, but because I'd rather die fighting than let you enslave my patients. This is Marcus Rodriguez, mechanical engineer from Detroit. I've got 3 kids and a wife I love more than life itself. That's why I'm going to ram my ship into yours with a smile on my face. Because some things are worth dying for, and freedom is one of them. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Air Force pilot. Just so you know, we're not fighting you because we think we can win. We're fighting you because that's what humans do when someone tries to take our home. We fight until there's nothing left to fight with, and then we keep fighting anyway. The testimonials continued, hundreds of them, each one delivered with the same matter-of-fact determination that characterized everything about these impossible creatures. Pilots, engineers, doctors, teachers, students, all volunteering for missions they knew would end in their deaths, and doing so with the casual confidence of people discussing weekend plans. Turn it off, Zethkar commanded, but the damage was done. His entire command staff had witnessed something that challenged everything they thought they understood about warfare and sacrifice. Captain Vexona spoke what everyone was thinking. Sir, in 40 years of conquest, we've never encountered a species where the civilian population voluntarily enlists for suicide missions. Most civilizations surrender when their military forces are defeated. These humans seem to view civilian casualties as recruitment opportunities. Their entire population has become a military asset, Drakmore added quietly. Every human we kill potentially creates multiple volunteers for their attack forces. Traditional conquest doctrine doesn't account for this scenario. Zethkar stood silently, weighing options that all seemed to lead to the same conclusion. The humans were right, the Vorthak Empire could conquer Earth, but the cost would be devastating. Worse, the precedent would encourage resistance throughout their territory, potentially unraveling centuries of expansion. But there was another factor that disturbed him even more than the strategic implications. For the first time in his career, Zethkar found himself genuinely respecting an enemy.
Not their technology or their tactical skills, but their absolute refusal to accept defeat even when faced with impossible odds. Sir, the communications officer reported. Incoming priority transmission from Vorthak High Command. The display shifted to show Fleet Admiral Kethmore, the supreme military commander of the Vorthak Empire. His scarred visage reflected decades of successful conquest, and his presence filled the screen with authority that had cowed entire star systems. Commander Zethkar. The Admiral's voice carried across space with typical Vorthak directness. Explain why a single primitive world is requiring 3 days to pacify. Or, Zethkar began carefully. The situation here is unlike anything we've encountered before. The humans possess capabilities that our initial intelligence severely underestimated. Capabilities? Admiral Kethmore's 3 eyes narrowed dangerously. They have no interstellar travel, no energy weapons, no ships capable of challenging our fleet. What capabilities could possibly matter? Zethkar chose his words carefully, knowing that his career, and possibly his life, depended on making his superior understand the true nature of the threat they faced. Sir, they have something we've never encountered before. They have an entire civilization that prefers death to surrender, combined with the industrial capacity and tactical intelligence to make that preference strategically relevant. The Admiral's expression shifted from anger to interest as Zethkar continued his report. By the time he finished explaining the humans' defensive preparations, their technological adaptability, and their psychological profile, Fleet Admiral Kethmore was leaning forward with the expression of someone contemplating a puzzle that had no acceptable solution. Your assessment, Commander, the Admiral said finally. Sir, we can conquer this world, but the cost will be the equivalent of 10 conventional campaigns. More importantly, the precedent will destabilize our entire imperial structure. I believe we may have encountered the first species that represents a genuine threat to the long-term survival of the Vorthak Empire. The communication channel fell silent as Admiral Kethmore processed this unprecedented situation. Finally, he spoke with the weight of command that had shaped galactic politics for centuries. You have 24 hours to develop alternative solutions, Commander. If the humans cannot be conquered conventionally, then we must find other ways to neutralize the threat they represent. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar to contemplate options that all seemed to lead toward a conflict that would redefine the nature of warfare in their galaxy. The humans had forced the Vorthak Empire into uncharted territory, and the next 24 hours would determine whether that journey led to victory or catastrophe. The war room aboard the Bone Crusher had become a maze of holographic displays, tactical projections, and intercept data that painted an increasingly complex picture of human defensive capabilities. Commander Zethkar stood at the center of it all, his 4 arms manipulating different data streams as he tried to comprehend an enemy that seemed to evolve with each passing hour. Sir, reported Lieutenant Grexam, his voice tight with disbelief. You need to see this. The central display shifted to show real-time surveillance of Earth's surface. What Zethkar saw defied every principle of military logistics he had learned in 4 decades of warfare. Massive industrial complexes that had been producing civilian goods 48 hours ago were now churning out military hardware at rates that seemed physically impossible. How are they achieving this production capacity? He demanded. Chief Engineer Nextall, a grizzled veteran who had overseen the construction of battle stations across the Empire, stepped forward with data that made him shake his 3-crested head in amazement. Sir, they're not just converting existing facilities. They're implementing modular manufacturing principles that we've never encountered before. They call it distributed production methodology. Instead of building weapons in centralized factories, they're creating components in thousands of smaller facilities, then assembling them at mobile integration points. The display zoomed in to show human manufacturing sites in operation. Workers who had been producing transportation vehicles were now creating fighter craft engines. Electronics facilities were producing guidance systems. Even textile factories had been converted to manufacture components for spacesuits and equipment harnesses. The efficiency is remarkable, Nextall continued grudgingly. They're achieving production rates that rival our best military-industrial complexes, but using civilian infrastructure that can be relocated, hidden, or replaced within hours if destroyed. What about resource allocation? Zethkar asked. They can't possibly have enough rare metals and energy sources to sustain this level of production. That's where it becomes truly concerning, sir, Captain Bexona interjected. They're not using rare metals. They're building weapons from common materials available on their planet in abundance. Steel,
aluminum, silicon, and carbon, in various forms. The designs are crude by our standards, but they're functional and can be manufactured using materials they can extract from virtually anywhere on their world. Zethkar studied the tactical implications with growing unease. The Vorthak Empire's weapons required exotic materials that were rare throughout the galaxy. This gave them technological superiority but also created strategic vulnerabilities. If supply lines were disrupted, their advanced weapons became impossible to replace. The humans were building an entire war machine from materials that were literally dirt common on their planet. "Show me their latest craft designs," he ordered. The display shifted to show detailed scans of human fighter vehicles that had been observed in the past 12 hours. What he saw challenged every assumption about military engineering he had ever held. "These are not designed to survive combat," he observed. "They're designed to ensure maximum damage before inevitable destruction." "Exactly, sir. Each craft is essentially a guided missile with a pilot. They've stripped away everything non-essential, life support is minimal, armor is non-existent, and the majority of each vessel's mass is devoted to either propulsion or warhead delivery." Chief Tactical Analyst Drexvik manipulated the display to show combat projections. "Our simulations suggest that each human fighter craft has approximately a 15-second combat lifespan against our point defense systems. But in those 15 seconds, each one can deliver firepower equivalent to our heavy assault missiles." 15 seconds, Zethkar repeated slowly. "And they're building how many of these craft?" "Current production estimates suggest they're completing approximately 200 per hour, with that rate accelerating as more facilities come online."
The mathematics were horrifying. In a single day, the humans were producing nearly 5,000 suicide fighters.
Each one might only survive 15 seconds in combat, but those 15-second intervals would add up to over 20 hours of continuous incoming fire. No point defense system in the galaxy could maintain effectiveness under such sustained assault. "Sir," interrupted the communications officer, "we're receiving another transmission from the human leadership. They're requesting immediate conference." On screen, General Harrison appeared, but this time the background showed what was clearly a military command center in full operation. Human officers moved with practiced efficiency around displays showing global defensive coordination on a scale that impressed even veteran Vorthak military personnel.
"Commander Zethkar," Harrison began, "we thought you should know that we've been monitoring communications between your fleet and your high command. We understand you've been given 24 hours to develop alternative solutions."
The casual revelation that humans had somehow intercepted and decoded secure Vorthak military communications sent a chill through the bridge crew. Such capability should have been impossible for a species that had never encountered their technology before. "How?" Zethkar asked simply. "Doctor?" Chen appeared beside Harrison, carrying data tablets that showed analysis beyond anything the Vorthak had thought possible from a primitive civilization. "Your communication systems use quantum entanglement principles that we've been experimenting with for the past 20 years, she explained with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing established science.
Once we observed the transmission patterns, it was relatively straightforward to decode the entanglement frequencies and develop translation protocols. 20 years? Captain Bexona interjected from beside Zethkar.
"You've had theoretical quantum communication for 20 years. Theoretical and practical are different things," Dr. Chen replied. "We couldn't build reliable systems with our available technology, but analyzing your communications gave us the missing pieces we needed. We've actually improved our quantum research by several decades just from studying your transmissions." The implication struck Zethkar like a physical blow. Not only had the humans been intercepting their communications, they had been using that intelligence to accelerate their own technological development. The enemy was learning and adapting in real time.
"But that's not why we contacted you," Harrison continued. "We wanted to make you an offer." "An offer?" Zethkar's mandibles clicked in surprise.
"A demonstration. We understand that your military doctrine is based on overwhelming displays of force. You conquer worlds by proving that resistance is futile. We thought you might benefit from seeing what human resistance actually looks like." Before Zethkar could respond, the tactical display began showing alerts throughout local space. Hundreds of new contacts were emerging from concealment around Earth, launching from hidden positions on the planet's surface and from installations throughout the orbital region. "What you're seeing," Harrison explained calmly, "is just the first wave of our defensive fleet. These are the craft we've completed in the past 72 hours. The display showed a sight that would haunt Zethkar for the rest of his life. A swarm of human fighters unlike anything in galactic warfare doctrine, thousands of small, fast-moving craft converging on the Vorthak fleet from every conceivable angle. Not flying in formation or following predictable attack patterns, but moving with the chaotic coordination of a natural phenomenon. Each pilot is a volunteer,
Dr. Chen added.
Each craft is equipped with weapons specifically designed to exploit the tactical vulnerabilities we identified in your ship configuration, and each one is operated by someone who considers dying for Earth to be the highest honor they can achieve.
The first wave of human fighters reached the outer perimeter of Vorthak defensive positions within minutes. Zethkar watched as his point defense systems engaged targets that moved with impossible unpredictability.
Some fighters flew straight toward their targets, accepting destruction to create gaps in the defensive fire. Others used the explosions of their destroyed comrades as concealment for precise attacks on specific ship systems.
Casualties? Zethkar demanded. The destroyer Fleshrender is reporting critical damage to main power systems, reported Lieutenant Grexam.
The cruiser Bloodspear has lost primary weapons control. Sir, they're not trying to destroy our ships. They're specifically targeting systems that will disable us without causing catastrophic damage.
They want to capture our vessels, Captain Vexona realized with growing alarm. General Harrison's voice continued across the communication channel as the battle raged around them.
We're not interested in destroying your fleet, Commander. Dead enemies can't learn from their mistakes. We want you to return to your empire with a very specific message. The human attack suddenly ceased as abruptly as it had begun.
The surviving fighters withdrew to defensive positions, leaving the Vorthak fleet damaged but intact. Several ships had been disabled, but none had been destroyed despite having been overwhelmed by forces that should have annihilated them.
The message, Harrison continued, is simple. Humanity is not prey.
We are not a resource to be harvested or a population to be enslaved. We are predators who have been disguised as prey for so long that we've almost forgotten what we really are.
The display shifted to show damage assessments that made the Vorthak bridge crew stare in stunned silence. In less than 30 minutes, human forces had disabled 60% of the fleet's offensive capabilities while losing fewer than 400 craft. The 2 processors of Cattlefeld did duties coming from the mill. More importantly, the humans had demonstrated tactical coordination, technological innovation, and strategic thinking that matched or exceeded anything in Vorthak military experience.
But here's what should really concern you, Doctor. Chen added. Everything you just witnessed was accomplished using resources and personnel we assembled in less than 4 days.
Imagine what we could accomplish with 4 months, or 4 years, or 4 decades of preparation. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before delivering her final point.
Your empire conquers worlds by being more advanced than your enemies. But what happens when you encounter an enemy that can match your advancement within days of first contact? What happens when you face a species that treats your superior technology as a learning opportunity rather than an insurmountable obstacle? Zethkar found himself staring at displays showing human industrial output that had continued unabated throughout the battle. Even while fighting for their lives, they had maintained production schedules that were turning out new weapons and defensive systems.
They were literally growing stronger during combat. Sir, Communications Officer Hextall reported. We're receiving priority transmission from Fleet Admiral Kethmore. The Admiral's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression showing the strain of someone who had been monitoring the battle from afar. Commander Zethkar, Admiral Kethmore spoke with carefully controlled anger. Explain how a primitive world just disabled most of the 47th Imperial Fleet. Sir, Zethkar began. Knowing that his career was effectively over regardless of his explanation, we're not dealing with a primitive world. We're dealing with a species that possesses the most dangerous combination of traits we've ever encountered. Technological adaptability, tactical intelligence, industrial capacity, and most critically, absolute refusal to accept defeat regardless of cost. Admiral Kethmore's 3 eyes narrowed as he processed this assessment. Your recommendation? For the first time in his military career, Zethkar was about to recommend something that went against every principle of Vorthak expansion doctrine.
Sir, I recommend immediate withdrawal and implementation of maximum distance quarantine protocols. The humans represent an existential threat to Imperial stability. They cannot be conquered through conventional means, and any extended engagement will result in catastrophic losses to our forces. You're suggesting we retreat from a single planet? I'm suggesting we prevent this conflict from escalating into something that could destroy the Empire, sir. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that suggest they could become competitive with our technology within a matter of months, if they achieve interstellar travel capabilities. Zethkar didn't need to finish the thought. Both officers understood the implications of a species with human psychological traits and Vorthak technological capabilities spreading throughout the galaxy. 24 hours, Commander. Admiral Kethmore decided finally. Use whatever methods necessary to neutralize this threat, but understand that failure is not acceptable. The transmission ended, leaving Zethkar to contemplate options that all seemed to lead toward catastrophe.
As he stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, surrounded by the evidence of human capabilities, he began to understand that his empire had encountered something unprecedented in galactic history.
The humans had done more than resist conquest. They had forced the Vorthak Empire to confront the possibility that they were no longer the galaxy's apex predators, and that realization was about to change everything.
Commander Zethkar stood in his private quarters aboard the Bone Crusher, staring at reports that painted a picture of escalating impossibility. 18 hours had passed since Admiral Kethmore's ultimatum, and every hour had brought new evidence that the humans were not just adapting to Vorthak technology, but actively improving upon it.
The latest intelligence briefing lay scattered across his desk. Surveillance images of human facilities that had somehow reverse-engineered plasma weapon technology from analyzing the energy signatures of Vorthak guns. Not crude approximations, but functional weapons that showed understanding of principles that had taken the Vorthak Empire centuries to develop. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. "Enter," Zethkar commanded. Lieutenant Colonel Drakmore stepped into the chamber, his expression showing the strain that had affected the entire command staff. "Sir, you need to see the latest intercepts from human communications." The intelligence officer activated a portable holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of Earth and its immediate orbital space. What Zethkar saw defied every assumption about primitive planetary defense. "They've completed construction of a permanent orbital defense grid," Drakmore reported with professional admiration despite himself. 17 battle stations positioned at strategic points around their planet, each one equipped with weapons that appear to be based on our own technology. Impossible. They don't have the manufacturing capacity or the materials to build 17 battle stations in 4 days. "Sir, they're not using traditional construction methods. They've somehow developed rapid assembly techniques using prefabricated modules. More disturbing, they're using materials salvaged from asteroids in their system combined with technology they've improvised based on analysis of our weapons." Zethkar studied the tactical display with growing unease. The human orbital defenses weren't positioned according to any standard defensive doctrine. Instead, they formed an interlocking network that would force attacking forces into predetermined killing zones while providing multiple fallback positions. "Energy output analysis?" he asked. "Each station appears capable of approximately 60% of the firepower of a Vorthak destroyer. Individually, they're not a significant threat to our fleet. Collectively, they represent more firepower than we can bring to bear." The implications were staggering. In less than a week, humans had constructed fixed defenses that outgunned the entire 47th Imperial Fleet. But what truly concerned Zethkar was the sophistication of their defensive planning. "Show me their ground-based installations." The display shifted to reveal surface installations that challenged everything Zethkar thought he understood about planetary defense. Instead of concentrating their defenses around major population centers, the humans had distributed weapons throughout their planet in a pattern that would make orbital bombardment prohibitively costly. "They've essentially turned their entire world into a fortress," Drakmore continued. "Every major city has been redesigned as a defensive complex. Underground tunnels connect population centers, allowing for resource sharing and coordinated defense. Mobile weapons platforms can be repositioned within hours to respond to changing tactical situations." "And the civilian population?"
Sir, there's no distinction between civilian and military populations anymore.
"Our latest intelligence suggests that every human above the age of 12 has been assigned specific roles in their planetary defense network. They've implemented what they call total societal mobilization." Zethkar felt a chill run through his armored hide as he contemplated the implications. The Vorthak Empire maintained control through targeted strikes against leadership and infrastructure, followed by demonstrations of overwhelming force. But the humans had eliminated the distinction between leadership and followers, between infrastructure and population, between military and civilian targets. They've made their entire civilization into a military target, he realized. "Every attack we make strengthens their resolve while eliminating the traditional leverage points we use for conquest." "Precisely, sir. But there's something else. We've intercepted communications suggesting they'd made contact with other species in this region of space." This caught Zethkar's attention immediately. Standard Imperial doctrine assumed that primitive worlds were isolated, lacking the communication technology to coordinate with other species. If the humans had somehow established interstellar contact, explain. Drakmore manipulated the display to show communication intercepts that had been captured over the past 12 hours. They've been broadcasting on frequencies that reach beyond their star system, not random signals, but clearly structured communications using mathematical principles that any technological species would recognize. "Who are they contacting?" "Unknown, sir, but we're detecting response signals from at least 3 different star systems."
The humans appear to be sharing technical data and requesting assistance. The strategic implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow.
If humans could convince other species to join their resistance, the conflict could escalate beyond a simple planetary conquest into a regional war that would require resources the Empire couldn't spare. His contemplation was interrupted by alarms throughout the ship.
"Commander to the bridge," announced the ship's communication system. "Priority alert." Zethkar rushed to the command center to find his bridge crew in controlled chaos. Tactical displays showed new contacts throughout the system, but these weren't the crude human fighters they had come to expect. "Report," he barked. "Sir," Captain Vexona replied with barely controlled amazement. "We're detecting incoming vessels from outside the system. At least 6 ships approaching at near light speed using what appears to be modified Vorthak drive technology." "Modified Vorthak drive technology?" "Yes, sir. The energy signatures are unmistakably based on our propulsion systems, but they've been altered in ways our engineers say shouldn't be possible." On the main display, Zethkar watched as 6 sleek vessels decelerated from interstellar velocity and took up positions alongside the human orbital defense stations. The ships were clearly not of human construction. Their design showed the elegant curves and integrated systems of a species far more advanced than Earth's inhabitants. "Incoming communication," reported the communications officer. "Multiple sources, multiple species, on screen." The display split to show several different faces, clearly representing different species but all sharing expressions of grim determination. One appeared humanoid but with silver skin and elongated features. Another showed a creature with multiple eyes and crystalline structures instead of hair. A third displayed what appeared to be a sentient energy being contained within a mechanical form. General Harrison appeared at the center of the group, his expression showing satisfaction that made Zethkar's blood run cold. "Commander Zethkar," Harrison began, "allow me to introduce our new allies. Commander Veltar of the Helian Republic, whose people were conquered by your empire 200 years ago. Captain Nixaria of the Crystal Dominion, whose world was enslaved 50 years ago. And Admiral Zorntek of the Synthetic Collective, whose entire species was deemed obsolete and marked for extinction by Vorthak doctrine." Each alien commander nodded grimly as they were introduced. And Zethkar began to understand the magnitude of the crisis his empire was facing.
It seems, Harrison continued, that humanity is not the only species that has been waiting for someone to demonstrate that the Vorthak Empire can be successfully resisted.
Your attack on our world has become the catalyst for something much larger than a simple conquest. Commander Veltar of the Helians stepped forward, his silver features reflecting centuries of suppressed hatred. "For 200 years, my people have lived under Vorthak tyranny. We've watched our children taken as laborers, our resources stolen, our culture suppressed, but we've also been preparing, waiting for the right moment to strike back." Captain Nixaria's crystalline structures chimed with harmonics that the translation system converted into words, filled with barely controlled rage.
The Crystal Dominion remembers when our world sang with the voices of billions. Now they echo with emptiness because your empire decided our people were more useful as energy sources than as living beings.
But it was Admiral Zorntek whose words carried the most ominous implications for the Vorthak Empire. The Synthetic Collective has been analyzing Vorthak military doctrine for 50 years, waiting for an opportunity to test our conclusions. The humans have provided that opportunity. Harrison smiled with the same disturbing confidence that had characterized every human communication.
"Commander, you came here to conquer one world.
Instead, you've triggered the formation of the first effective anti-Vorthak alliance in galactic history. Congratulations, you've united 4 species that have one very important thing in common." "Which is?" Zethkar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We all have very good reasons to want your empire destroyed," Harrison replied simply.
The tactical display updated to show the true scope of what Zethkar was facing. The 6 alien vessels that had arrived weren't just support ships. They were advanced warships carrying technology that had been specifically designed to counter Vorthak military advantages.
Worse, they were crewed by species that understood Vorthak tactics intimately because they had been on the receiving end of Imperial conquest. "Sir," Lieutenant Grexam reported with a voice tight with fear, "energy readings from the alien vessels are off the scale."
They're not just carrying weapons, they're carrying weapons specifically designed to penetrate our defenses. And they've shared their technological data with us. Dr.
Chen added from the communication screen. "In the past 12 hours, we've learned more about advanced warfare than we had in our entire previous history."
We're not just defending our world anymore, Commander.
We're preparing to take the war to your empire.
Admiral Zorantek's mechanical voice carried across the communication channel with the precision of a species that had been created specifically for warfare. The Synthetic Collective has identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in Vorthak Imperial infrastructure.
17 points of failure that, if properly exploited, would result in the complete collapse of your logistical network. The Helian Republic has maintained intelligence networks throughout occupied Vorthak space for 2 centuries, Commander Veltar added.
We know the location of every major military installation, every resource processing facility, every administrative center in your empire. Captain Nixaria's crystalline forms resonated with deadly harmony. The Crystal Dominion possesses weapons technology that your species has never encountered. Technology that was hidden and preserved specifically for the day when we could use it against our oppressors.
Harrison stepped forward again, and his next words would haunt Zethkar for the rest of his life. Commander, you have a choice. You can withdraw your fleet now and return to your empire with a message of peace. We're willing to coexist with the Vorthak Empire if it's willing to coexist with us.
Or you can continue this attack and discover exactly what happens when 4 species unite with the specific goal of ending Vorthak expansion. The human general paused, allowing the implications to sink in before delivering his final statement.
But understand this. If you choose to continue this fight, it won't end with the conquest of Earth. It will end with the liberation of every world your empire has ever conquered, and the complete dismantling of the Vorthak imperial system.
The communication ended, leaving Zethkar to stare at tactical displays that showed his single fleet facing an alliance that possessed superior numbers, advanced technology, detailed intelligence about Vorthak weaknesses, and most importantly, the accumulated hatred of centuries of oppression. For the first time in the history of the Vorthak Empire, a conquest fleet found itself facing not just resistance, but the very real possibility of total defeat at the hands of the species they had come to conquer.
And in the silence of his bridge, Commander Zethkar began to understand that his empire had just made the most catastrophic strategic error in galactic history. The emergency session of the Vorthak High Command took place via quantum communication across half the galaxy, with fleet admirals and sector commanders participating from their scattered positions throughout the empire. Commander Zethkar found himself at the center of the most important military discussion in Vorthak history, knowing that his next words would determine the fate of a galactic empire that had stood unchallenged for over a millennium. Supreme Admiral Kothrex, ruler of the Vorthak Empire's military forces, dominated the holographic display from his position aboard the fortress world of Vorthak Prime. His ancient features, scarred by centuries of conquest, reflected the weight of command over millions of warships and trillions of subject populations.
Commander Zethkar, the Supreme Admiral's voice carried the authority of absolute power, explained to this assembly how a single primitive world has become an existential threat to our empire. Zethkar stood before the assembled leadership of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, knowing that his analysis would either save the empire or destroy his career. Around him, the holographic forms of dozens of senior commanders waited for an explanation that would make sense of the impossible situation developing in the Sol system.
Supreme Admiral, honored commanders, Zethkar began. We are not facing a primitive world. We are facing the most dangerous military development in galactic history, the emergence of a species that combines technological adaptability with absolute refusal to accept defeat.
He gestured to tactical displays showing real-time intelligence from Earth. In 7 days, the humans have progressed from pre-interstellar technology to weapons systems that match our capabilities. They have formed military alliances with 3 previously conquered species, creating the first effective anti-Vorthak coalition in our history. Most critically, they have demonstrated that our imperial doctrine contains fundamental flaws that make us vulnerable to determined resistance. Fleet Admiral Nethfar, commander of the Second Imperial Fleet, leaned forward with the skepticism of someone who had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. Commander, you're describing capabilities that violate known laws of technological development.
No species can advance that rapidly without existing infrastructure. Respectfully, sir, that assumption is incorrect. The humans don't advance technology in the same way other species do. They don't develop new capabilities. They adapt existing capabilities to new purposes with unprecedented speed and efficiency.
Zethkar manipulated the holographic display to show human manufacturing facilities in operation. They've converted their entire civilization into a military-industrial complex within 1 week. Not by building new factories, but by modifying existing infrastructure to serve military purposes.
A facility that manufactured transportation vehicles on day 1 was producing fighter craft on day 3 and orbital weapons platforms on day 7.
Impressive efficiency, admitted Sector Commander Graxtor. But efficiency alone cannot account for the technological leaps you're describing. The technological advancement comes from their approach to reverse engineering, sir.
Most species attempt to understand alien technology completely before attempting to use it. Humans analyze alien technology just enough to build functional copies, then improve those copies through rapid iteration.
Dr. Chen's analysis appeared on the display, showing human weapon designs that had evolved through 6 generations in as many days. Each iteration showed clear improvement over the previous version, with modifications that addressed weaknesses identified through combat testing. They treat warfare as an engineering problem, Zethkar continued.
Every engagement provides data that they use to improve their next design. They're not just fighting us, they're learning from us at a rate that allows them to match our capabilities within days of first contact.
Supreme Admiral Kothrex studied the data with the expression of someone contemplating a puzzle that challenged everything he thought he understood about military science. What about their alliance with the conquered species? How did primitive humans convince advanced civilizations to join their cause? Sir, the alliance was not formed through human diplomacy. It was formed through human example.
Zethkar shifted the display to show communication intercepts from the past week.
The conquered species have been monitoring our conflict with Earth. They watched humans demonstrate that Vorthak forces can be defeated through coordinated resistance and technological adaptation.
For the first time in centuries, they saw proof that our empire is not invincible. The implications struck the assembled commanders like a physical blow.
The Vorthak Empire maintained control over hundreds of conquered worlds through the perception of invincibility. If that perception was shattered, rebellion assessment? Supreme Admiral Kothrex demanded. Sector Commander Drexmally, responsible for internal security throughout the Empire, activated his own tactical display showing Imperial territory spanning dozens of star systems.
Red indicators marked worlds showing signs of unrest. Sir, we're detecting increased resistance activity on 47 conquered worlds. Communication traffic between previously pacified populations has increased by 300%. Most concerning, we're observing coordinated planning between resistance groups on different worlds, something that hasn't occurred since the early days of Imperial expansion. They're organizing. Fleet Admiral Nethwar realized with growing alarm. The conquered species are using human success as inspiration for galaxy-wide rebellion. Correct, sir. Our intelligence suggests that if the Earth conflict continues, we could face simultaneous uprisings on multiple worlds. Our military forces are designed for expansion and conquest, not for maintaining control over widespread rebellion.
Supreme Admiral Kothrex stood silently for several moments, processing strategic implications that threatened the foundation of Vorthak power. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions that would reshape galactic politics.
Alternative solutions? Sir, Zethkar said carefully, there are 3 options. None of them acceptable under traditional Imperial doctrine. Explain. First, we can attempt total extermination of Earth's population through massive orbital bombardment. This would eliminate the human threat but would require the destruction of an entire inhabited world.
The precedent would encourage desperate resistance on every world we attempt to conquer in the future. Second option? Negotiated withdrawal, with face-saving provisions.
We declare Earth to be outside our expansion zone due to unique defensive characteristics. This preserves Imperial prestige while avoiding a costly conflict.
And the third? Zethkar hesitated, knowing that his next words would be considered heretical by every Vorthak commander present. Alliance. The holographic forms of a dozen fleet admirals erupted in protest, their voices creating a cacophony of outraged military tradition.
Supreme Admiral Kothrex silenced them with a gesture. Explain. Sir, the humans possess capabilities that could be valuable to the Empire.
Their technological adaptability, manufacturing efficiency, and tactical innovation could strengthen our military forces if properly integrated. Rather than conquest, we could propose mutual defense treaties that provide us access to human capabilities while providing them protection from other galactic threats.
You're suggesting we negotiate with a primitive species as equals. I'm suggesting we recognize that they're not primitive, sir. They're the most militarily capable species we've ever encountered, disguised as primitives by their recent technological development. The question is whether we treat them as enemies or as assets. The communication channel fell silent as the assembled leadership of the Vorthak Empire contemplated options that all challenged fundamental assumptions about Imperial expansion and galactic dominance. It was Supreme Admiral Kothrex who finally spoke, his words carrying implications that would echo through galactic history. Commander Zethkar, you are authorized to open preliminary negotiations with the human leadership.
Terms to be discussed: cessation of hostilities, establishment of neutral zones, and potential cooperation on mutual defense initiatives.
The holographic forms of several fleet admirals protested immediately, but Cothrex continued with the authority of absolute command. The Empire has survived for over a millennium by adapting to new circumstances.
We face circumstances that require adaptation beyond anything in our previous experience. The alternative to negotiation may be the destruction of everything we have built.
Zethkar felt the weight of history as he prepared to undertake the first negotiated settlement in Vorthak military history. But before he could respond, new alerts began flashing on tactical displays throughout the command center.
"Sir," reported Lieutenant Grexam, "multiple contacts approaching the system. Large formations, unknown configurations."
The main display shifted to show sensor readings that defied immediate classification. Ships were approaching the Sol system from multiple vectors, but their design characteristics didn't match any known species in the galactic database.
Analysis? Zethkar demanded. Sir, the vessels appear to be using technology combinations from multiple species.
Helium propulsion systems, crystal dominion weapons configuration, synthetic collective navigation arrays, and what appears to be human manufacturing techniques. The implication struck Zethkar immediately.
Here.
The Alliance hadn't just shared technology, they had created hybrid vessels that combined the best capabilities of all four species. Number of approaching vessels? Over 200, sir, with more appearing on long-range sensors.
They're not approaching for defense, they're approaching for offensive operations. General Harrison's voice crackled across the communication system without any formal contact protocol.
Commander Zethkar, you might be interested to know that our alliance has been busier than you realized. The display shifted to show Harrison standing in what was clearly a massive space-based facility.
Around him, humans and aliens worked together on projects that combined multiple technological approaches in ways that challenged everything Zethkar knew about engineering. While you've been deciding whether to attack Earth, Harrison continued, we've been building the infrastructure for galactic liberation.
200 ships is just the beginning. We have allies you haven't met yet, weapons you haven't seen, and plans that extend far beyond the defense of our single world.
Dr. Chen appeared beside Harrison, carrying data that she displayed with the confidence of someone who had solved impossible problems.
We've established manufacturing facilities in 17 star systems, she announced. Each one is producing ships designed specifically to counter Vorthak military advantages.
Each one is staffed by species that have very personal reasons for wanting your empire defeated. Admiral Zorntek's mechanical form materialized in the communication, his synthetic voice carrying the precision of calculated warfare. The Galactic Liberation Alliance now includes representatives from 43 species across 27 star systems. Every one of them has contributed technology, resources, and personnel to the single goal of ending Vorthak expansion.
43 species. Supreme Admiral Cothrex's voice cut across the communication from Vorthak Prime. Impossible. We maintain control over all major civilizations in this region of space. You maintain control over their governments, Commander Veltar corrected as his silver features appeared in the display.
But governments and people are different things. The people have been waiting for hope.
Humanity provided that hope. Captain Nixaria's crystalline forms chimed with harmonic satisfaction. The Crystal Dominion has been secretly developing weapons specifically designed to destroy Vorthak vessels for 50 years. We finally have the opportunity to test them in actual combat.
Harrison stepped forward again, and his next words would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Commander Zethkar, Supreme Admiral Cothrex, honored leaders of the Vorthak Empire, he said with the formal tone of someone delivering an ultimatum to equals. The Galactic Liberation Alliance hereby demands the immediate cessation of all Vorthak expansion activities and the beginning of negotiations for the peaceful liberation of all conquered worlds. He paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing.
If you choose to continue military operations against any member of our alliance, we will consider it a declaration of war against all members, and we will respond with the combined military might of 43 species, united in the single purpose of ending your empire.
The communication ended, leaving the leadership of the Vorthak Empire to stare at tactical displays showing a galaxy that had fundamentally changed while they weren't paying attention. Supreme Admiral Cothrex spoke into the silence with the weight of a leader who understood that his empire's age of unchallenged dominance had just ended.
Commander Zethkar, he said quietly, open immediate negotiations with the human leadership. Full diplomatic protocols. The Empire's survival may depend on your success.
As Zethkar prepared for the most important negotiations in galactic history, he reflected on the profound irony of the situation. The Vorthak Empire had come to conquer a single primitive world, and instead had triggered the formation of the first successful resistance movement in over a millennium. The humans had done more than defend their home. They had shown the galaxy that the age of Vorthak dominance could end. And in doing so, they had transformed from an unknown species into the leaders of a new galactic order. The greatest military force in the galaxy had discovered that there was something more powerful than superior weapons or advanced technology. The refusal to accept defeat combined with the ability to inspire others to fight for freedom. And that discovery would change everything.
Humanity's most lethal forces, terrifying even alien soldiers. HFY stories.